Okay, okay. Take your seats. Settle down. Settle down. Welcome to the Road to Concord 101. This class is about all things connected to the path of history leading from Mount Sinai to Lexington Green and the individual liberty and freedom of man. If you're in the wrong place, feel free to get up and go see the registrar's office about dropping this class, preferably before you meet the professor. In the event you do not already know this, your professor is Joe Bakanovic, and he has a bit of a reputation on campus. He is most definitely an acquired taste, but if you can learn to tolerate him, he will make you better at defending your position, whatever it may be. I'm T.A. Charlie. I'm here to help the professor, but more importantly, you. We encourage you to take notes, and if you have questions, feel free to call. If you'd like the number, please email us. You can also post your questions in the comments, and we'll get the professor's attention. Part of my job is to let you know a little bit about your professor. As I said earlier, the professor has that bit of a reputation on campus. Not all of it is good. Let me help explain a little with a story about how I came to be the professor's TA. I was invited to attend one of his classes. My first impression of the professor was that he was an egotistical, narcissistic know-it-all. My intent after only a few minutes of class was never to attend another class with this professor. But after class, Professor Joe came up to me and thanked me for my class participation and told me that my perspective was valuable, and he asked me to keep coming to class. This actually took me back a little. To me, he seemed inconsistent. What was I to do? I decided to continue coming to his classes. As I did, I actually started doing what he does encourage students to do. Check behind him and see if what he is teaching is actually correct. I have done this over and over again, and generally speaking, I found what he teaches to be backed by sound, valid, and rational arguments from reputable sources. When I have challenged him and provided a sound, valid, and rational argument in opposition to his current position, he immediately changed his position and thanked me for correcting him. Why do I tell you all this? Professor Joe is a little rough around the edges, especially in the way he delivers his content. But if you stick with him and listen to what he teaches and then go and check his sources, you will likely find, as I did, he will help you better understand the world around you and help you to think better and hopefully to live better. At least that is our hope. One last note. This class builds on itself. Therefore, it is important to attend class regularly. We will not always have time to go over previously covered material. If you are new, we suggest you watch our older classes. We've created playlists to help you with those things we feel are of special importance. Now, let's get started.
Good morning. Welcome to the Road to Concord. It is Thursday, November 13th, 2025. I am, the professor, Joe Bakanovic. I got a different class for you today. I was thinking about doing some work in the Dr. Heiser book study that we do on We Who Are Lost, but I changed my mind. I'm just going to get your coffee or whatever it is you're drinking, sit back and let me talk to you a little bit today. I'm going to be talking about the role and importance of idealism in public and private life. Excuse me. But I want to explain how I got there today. Why this show. I am trying very hard to figure out exactly how to put a point on this program and make it something that will have... Hold on. We got a rabbit. Mr. Zinker says, hey, y'all, I think blah, blah, blah is the most intelligently thought out response to an argument I have heard this week. Mr. Zinker is referring to a reply I got from somebody on another thread on Facebook who wanted to know why I don't ever debate him. And I gave him a reasonable, rational, well thought out, and detailed response. And that was literally his reply to me, blah, blah, blah. So he proved my point. That's kind of actually not a bad segue to where I'm going. I don't want this show to be blah, blah, blah. I don't want to waste your time. I want to serve Yahweh by serving my fellow man, by doing something that you find valuable, that you want to tune into this show. So I'm looking for what it is. What are my strengths? What is it that I do on the show that people really like, especially this side, the Road to Concord? And I called one of my friends. We went to lunch. He listens from time to time. And he said something that could have literally come out of Mr. Zinker's mouth. He said that it's not really the subject matter I latch onto every day. He said what he finds most fascinating, and I'll paraphrase it, is that I will say, okay, we're starting here at X, and I'll walk you to where I want to go with it. And he says, listening to the way I get there, the way I reason through it, he finds that fascinating. And that's what he listens for. So that helped me, because that does seem to be something that I do that's different from most of the other people on the internet and the radio and TV trying to, do something like this. But I called another friend of mine, and I haven't seen Miss Boatwright check in yet, but this gentleman is my second oldest friend that I still know. And it goes all the way back to junior high for me, high school for him, his first year of high school. There she is. Well, then you know exactly who Squiggy is, Miss Boatwright, if you can remember the individual I used to call Squigman. So I called him, self-made millionaire, smart guy, competent, does good work in the world. But I asked him what my biggest flaw is. And I asked him because I knew he'd actually tell me the truth. And he told me it was the hole in my face, located just south of my nose. And he said the problem with it is it's not just that it's always running, but that it's usually saying something that has a little bit of thought and a little bit of truth behind it. And he did tell me that one of my greatest strengths is that I listen to both sides. And then he went into Trump derangement syndrome. That's a different story. But he gave me, everybody I talked to yesterday, they gave me the idea for today's show. Another friend of mine who's in St. Louis, he listens from time to time. He also told me that the strength of this side of the show is how much I know, which he said very few people are aware of anymore. And then he said the way I explain it and make it relatable and valuable to your current life, how I make it applicable to our daily world. And he said very few people can do that. That's his opinion. I don't know that I necessarily agree with all of this stuff. That's the recovering narcissist in me. But I want to talk to you about what I got from all of it, because every one of them, in their own indubitable way, was telling me, Joe, the problem you have is you're an idealist. And I've always thought that was a handicap. I'm coming to realize now it's the greatest blessing that Yahweh has ever given me. It doesn't mean it's going to make my life easy. Far from it. But it is a blessing. And before the end of the show, I'll get to why I count it that way. So you know me, idealism. Got to go to the definitions, right? I went to the Webster's 1828 dictionary online, and I looked up ideal. Existing in idea, intellectual, mental, as ideal knowledge. There will always be a wide interval between practical and ideal excellence. Yes, and that's pretty much what my friends were trying to tell me. It says visionary, existing in fancy or imagination only, as ideal good. So it's an imaginary picture of the ideal, of the perfect. And it says that considers ideas as images, phantasm. Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. But the ideal theory or philosophy. So essentially, what it's telling me here is that the ideal is a mental image or conception of perfection. Okay, I got that. It's also that which is thought of as a standard or a model, a standard by which we can measure something. So in that case, it reminded me of this. There's a quote by George Washington. Let us raise a standard to which the wise and honest can repair. The rest is in the hands of God. Now, this is an interesting statement. I don't know exactly what he meant. I'd have to go back and find the letter or the speech from which it comes and do what Charlie says, read 20 lines before, 20 lines after. Why do I say that this is so hard to understand? What does he mean by standard? If he says, let us raise an ideal to which the wise and honest can repair, what does he mean by repair? These are not these are not nothing questions. This is how I think. And for those of you who are interested, the show will be of value to you in whichever way you want it or allow it to be. For those of you who think this is boring or a waste of your time, okay, fine. You do you. You're responsible for your own life and your own accountability. I want to explain this. Let us raise a standard. Okay. What the heck is a standard? Well, let's go find out. Standard. It's an ensign of war. No, I don't think that's what I'm looking for. That which is established by a sovereign power as a rule or measure by which others are to be adjusted. Thus, the Winchester bushel is a standard of measures in Great Britain and is adopted in the United States. Okay, that's close. It's something, an objective standard or something, or a known set, principle by which we can measure something. In this case, wheat or grain or something. But the third definition, that which is established as a rule or model by the authority of public opinion or by respectable opinions or by custom or general consent as writings which are admitted to be the standard of a style or taste, Homer, Iliad. Okay, I'm starting to get the idea of standard. It's something that we can measure against. The ideal is the standard. I think that's what he meant. But what did he mean by repair? Well, you can fix things when you go astray. Yes, maybe. Repair, to restore to a sound or good state after decay, injury, dilapidation, or partial destruction. 2, to rebuild a part of decayed or destroyed, to make amends as for an injury, but also verb, to which the wise and honest can repair, to go to betake oneself, to resort, or as to repair to a sanctuary or a safety. I don't think that George Washington meant this as a double entendre, meaning two things at once, but it works for my purpose at hand. Let us raise a standard or an ideal, an objective target to which the wise and honest can repair. Can aim for? No. Can use to correct things? Maybe. Can run to for a bulwark from attack or despair or bad times? Yeah, I think so. And then he says the rest lands in rest in the hands of God. I like this. I like that. That seems to be the way I want to read this. Why is that important? Well, first of all, that's a founding father telling us how to do these things. So let's put this in another way. We are in a Judeo-Christian ethos here on this show. It's a Judeo-Christian worldview for this show. You've heard me mention this before. This is an archery target or a picture of an archery target. You have an X in the dead center. There's a small bullseye right there around the X. And then you have the white center. That's the bullseye. It's 5 points. And then you get 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point as you go further from the target. Now, you've heard me refer to the V ring before. Whoops, that's not the picture I want. Hold on a second here, folks. This is what happens when you allow me to play with technology. All right, this is a picture of a United States Marine Corps, what we called able target. We're going to chase a small rabbit here for a moment. That's the V ring in the center. It actually has a V there. Most of the time, we don't have the 5 with the V. We just have the V. And you have the 5 for the center of the bullseye. The V ring is for competition shooting. If you and I keep shooting and we fire 10 times and both of us hits the target, we hit the bullseye all 10 times. Well, how do you break the tie? You break the tie with how many of us hit the V ring. Okay, let's say you put all 10 of your rounds in the V ring and I put all 10 of mine in the V ring. Again, how do we break the tie? Which one of us hit the V the most? Because the V is usually in the dead center of the Marine Corps target. So how many of us actually hit closest to the V? Trust me, if you got 100 people on the firing line, you are not going to have 2 people hit that V the same amount of times. It doesn't happen, even amongst expert marksmen. That's a tough thing to do. But this is our ideal. That V is the perfect ideal of whatever it is we're thinking. And then the V ring is closer to the ideal, but not quite. The black bullseye is still close to the ideal, but a little farther away, etc., etc. So I want to show you something real quick, just as a rabbit for those of you who might be wondering. These are the dimensions of the Marine Corps able and dog target. Dog is on the right. We're not worried about that. At 200 and 300 yards, that's what the target looks like for me when I was shooting in the Marine Corps. You're shooting at a 10-inch bullseye all the way up to 300 yards. And at 300 yards, you still have to shoot offhand, standing up. And we did this with the old-fashioned iron sights. That's not what's supposed to be up there. This thing is not doing, there we go, iron sights. So that's kind of what the target sort of kind of looks like at 200 yards. It's actually, that dot would be a little smaller. And at 300 yards, it's really tiny. But let me get back to our archery target. Whoop, I deleted it. So you know what? Didn't mean to delete it. This was set up properly. It shouldn't have done this. I actually checked everything before the show. Honest to God, I did. I don't know why it's doing that. Shouldn't have done it. Anyhow, archery target, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The farther away from the center of the target you get, the farther you have drifted from the ideal. That's why I drug you through all of this. I'm former military. I just thought it was a good time to explain to you why you hear me talk about the V ring from time to time. It's a archery, or in this case, a target shooting term. But this got me to thinking of, scriptural worldview, the way. If you're a Bible believer, the way is your ideal. That's your target. Torah. Torah is the target. So righteousness is conforming to the ideal, hitting the target. If you're living righteously, you're hitting the target. The more you hit the target, the closer to the center of the bull, the I glitched on my end. I don't know if it showed on yours. I'm over the target. There is nothing wrong with the internet here today, folks. I don't know if it's my computer, but yes, ma'am.
It seems to have frozen right after you said bull.
Yeah. So the more closely you are walking according to Yahweh's teachings, the more righteous you are, because you're hitting closer and closer to the center of the bullseye. Sin is an archery target. And Torah means to cast or to throw. It's related to that root word. So the straighter you shoot, the closer to the bullseye you're going to get, the center of the bullseye. Sin means that you have missed the target. The farther you stray from the ideal, the more you're missing the target. So are you in the 5 ring? You're close to, you're righteous. You're close to Torah. Are you hitting the 4 ring? which is, you're still trying, but you're struggling with it. Are you hitting the 3 ring, 2 ring, 1 ring? If you're outside the 1 ring, you are an unrepentant sinner. But now, how does this apply to the U.S. government? Well, you've heard me say this to you before. The United States government's ideal is expressed in the Declaration of Independence. That's our ideal. That's the what and the why of America. The spirit of America is expressed in that ideal, in the Declaration. So as we said, the ideal is a standard. It's a target to shoot for. It's an objective means by measuring our accuracy, how we're living, both individually and as a culture or a society. This is the important part I'm learning. What does idealism have to do with the individual and with a society or a culture? In a free and self-governing society, as goes the individual, so goes the community, society, nation. You can even take that to the family. So the farther from the ideal you and I drift as parents, the farther from the ideal our children will drift, which means the farther from the ideal our community will drift, and then our society, and eventually our nation. It's decay. It's the decay of a culture or a society. Society's ideal or ideals provide the archetypes by which that society measures itself, the target. And as I thought about this, I realized that's where we get our heroes from. Our heroes are those who live up to the ideals, no matter what, even if it cost them something, even if it cost them their life. That you go back, I've been studying Western civilization again, the rise of Western Civ and the role that the Greeks played in it. In the Greek tragedy, we get drama, or the idea of drama, from the Greeks, plays and TVs, movies, et cetera, from the Greeks. That's where it really came into vogue. And you have what they call a Greek tragedy. And the Greek tragedy, today we think, cool entertainment and everything. Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy. It's a Greek tragedy. What do we mean by a Greek tragedy? A Greek tragedy is when your hero is placed into a no-win moral conundrum. And most of their plays surrounded, so we're centered on these type of things. You're put in a situation where you have to decide one morality over another. You got 2 moral ideals, moral principles in your society, and you're at odds with each other. One of the plays that I remember, an individual is, I don't remember the Greek person's name, but he's put in a position where he has to, because in their culture, you have to honor your father. That's a big deal. Honoring your father is thought to be a pre-existing law of mankind, that, honoring your parents, that's outside of man's control, which happens to be one of the commandments, honor thy father and mother. The Greeks said it was natural law. So he's placed in the position where it is said that his brother raped his mother. No, not his brother, the king. That's it. The king raped his mother or something like this. So honor demands that he kills this person, but then he's also honor bound to protect the life of the king or whatever. So this individual's in a no-win situation. And that's a Greek tragedy. You're in a no-win situation and you have to make moral choices. Well, we're a Judeo-Christian worldview show. Where's that in the Bible? That's very easy. Do you know your Gospels? The Pharisees come up and say, you can't do any work on the Sabbath. And the Messiah turns around and says, am I allowed to do good on the Sabbath? Can I heal on the Sabbath? Can I do good? What's the higher level of the law? So where the Pharisees were looking at it legalistically, trying to make sure they hit the target through works, the Messiah turned around and said, you've missed the spirit of the law, the purpose of the law. And he showed them that there's a moral aspect to the law, not just a wooden, chiseled in stone, legalistic aspect to the law. There's a hierarchy. So that's part of what the Greek tragedy is meant to teach us. Well, you have to have these archetypes in your society in order to even understand this. And then for us, we're all modern and we're above all that. We've advanced way past them ancient backwards Greeks. Yeah, right. Their society, the rank and file Greek citizen, was very much enamored with these type of discussions, these type of conundrums and problems. This was the stuff they discussed every day. It was it was the struggle over ideal within society, and it helped bind them. It formed common bonds. These little stories that were very common to the Greek society. Now, yes, they were based in paganism. I got that. Set that aside. I'm looking at, you can find good and evil in everything, even in the scriptures. It just depends on how you're looking at it and what you're looking for. So what it was is the society had something common around which to discuss or measure, or common, not so much objective in the sense of outside of man's control, but objective as in it was outside of the individual's control within the society. Society had formed these ideals and they had become tradition. So in the Greek world, the tradition is you don't buck society. You don't just change just for the sake of changing. That would have been thought to be against the ideal. It would have been seen as a sin. You're wandering from the ideal. You're going to cause social disillusion. This is also where we get our villains from, those who buck our ideals, our targets. Now, you may not think of it this way, but if you're old enough, excuse me, let's for those of you who are, I guess, really old millennials, the first millennials, but definitely Generation X and boomers. When I was in school, there were only 3 TV channels. And there were generally, just a few things you could watch at night when you were done with your homework. And we used to love to sit up and watch Saturday Night Live. Now, that's back when it was actually funny. So what did that do for us? Well, what do you think everybody in my age group was going to be talking about Monday morning? Well, Miami Vice, what happened on Miami Vice and what happened on Saturday Night Live? Everybody had the same thing to talk about. Now, if you're a boomer, you were probably talking about what happened on Johnny Carson. So everybody had common connections, and it formed a more cohesive, more homogeneous society. There were different ideals, different, Mr. Bill. Oh no, the Mr. Bill show. There were, it was the same standards. So now if you go back and you read the Founding Fathers, one of the centralized principles or ideals for them was the Bible. Everybody knew it. Even if they didn't not necessarily adhere to it or agree with it, you still went to church whether you liked it or not. It's what you did. So everybody goes for the most part. There were exceptions, don't get me wrong, but everybody knew the scriptures, knew that well. Everybody will tell them, historians tell you today, George Washington is not he's not a Christian, rather. You read his letters and it's full of scripture, but he doesn't say chapter and verse, this, the Bible says that. He just quotes it. You do all the time too. You just don't realize it. Talk about, wolf in sheep's clothing, dog returns to its vomit, pig to its mire, these type of things. Those are found in your Bible. That's where, I'm sure they existed in that time, but that's where the Western culture gets them from, is from the Bible. That's where the West picked them up and turned them into idioms. So the ideal seems to be the glue, the shared ideals. That's the unity of a society. It seems to be the glue that bonds it together. Opposing ideals cause conflict within the society. And when the ideals break down to the point where nobody has them, or everybody has their own, or there are none at all, now we got chaos. So to the extent that a society continues to embrace its ideals, it's strong. But as society starts rejecting its ideals, it breaks down. Tradition, accumulated wisdom of a people. accumulated through experience. Wisdom being experience guided by intellect and knowledge. And, so the tradition is an accumulated wisdom of a people, of a culture. That's what part of what forms the culture is those traditions. It forms the ideal. It's a bulwark. It's connected to ideal. It reflects their history. It informs their ideals. It ties them together. So if you attack or dismiss tradition, you're attacking the ideal. You're attacking the history of that culture, which is why that's something that a conqueror quickly does, is destroys the history of a people so that they have no standard to which to repair, to run back for guidance, for surety, for comfort. No place to have an intellectual or an emotional defensive barrier. So you remove that. And it's been said that's one of the surest ways to conquer a people is to destroy their history or their knowledge of their history. So the 60s, they wanted to, it's counterculture. It was against the ideal. It's revolutionary. Marx wants revolution. He wants counterculture, a new ideal. What happens when you and I have our own ideals and nobody else conforms to them? Well, these are my pronouns. That's different ideal per each individual. This is why libertarianism doesn't work. Every libertarian has their own ideal. The more different ideals, the more entropy. Remember from back when the show first started, I talked to you about social entropy? The more disorder, the less cohesion, the more disorganization. So as you undermine the embrace of the society's ideals, the culture's ideals, as you attack their heroes and make heroes of their villains, the more that society is dissolved, the more that culture falls apart. It's nihilism. It is nihilism. It's the destruction rather than the building up. So when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about why the idealist is so important. Bottom of the hour break. You have 3 minutes. We'll see you when we return. Charlie, play my music for me, please. Welcome back. Real quick housekeeping note. November 24th through 28th, that's the week of Thanksgiving. I'm going to do my best to have replays for you, but there will be no new live shows that entire week. And then the 2 weeks around the Christmas and New Year's holiday period, December 22nd through January 2nd, there'll be no shows then either. I will do my very best to set up and do replays. Probably go back to some of our very oldest shows, like the one on social entropy. Those are 2-hour shows, and maybe put them up there for you so that, you'll have something to watch if you want to. And repetition's a good thing in a lot of ways. So that's just a historic thing that I've done my life since I started my own business. It's mostly because my wife is off at that time. And Jimmy Singer says, "Oh no, is that the Mr. Bill show, or is that I'm not going to be on?" But I need the vacation, folks. And so do you. There's only so much of listening to me that the average human being can tolerate. I know that. I'm an acquired taste, remember? It's kind of like wasabi black coffee. Let's get back to the idealist. I have been told my whole life I'm an idealist. I know, I'm fully aware that you have to make compromises to get anything done in this world. I get that. One of the examples that was given to me yesterday was, the gentleman was in the military. He said, "Do you think I agreed with all of my bosses?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I had to go along to get along in order to get the job done." I know what he was saying. He said he had to play politics in order to get, to survive and get promotion, et cetera, et cetera. I got that. I got that. But in the military, that's a little easier to do. I'm not going to get into another military rabbit, but it's easier to do in the military than it is in a lot of other areas. There are more protections against cronyism, not total protections. I got caught by cronyism. People who didn't like me, my military career suffered, and it was because of my big mouth. I get that. I understand that. But he was right about one thing. I don't play politics well. I don't. The idealist is like a prophet. He reminds the people of the ideal, of history, of tradition, where they've come from. How did that tradition come to be? Why is it still there? Why have we kept it? Why is it important to you? The prophet defends the ideal. In the Bible, he's defending the word of Yahweh. He's defending the Torah, the way. He reminds them of what it is. And like in this case, on the road to Concord, I remind you of the founding documents, the founding fathers, their story, how they got to where they were. What did they intend by the Declaration? What did they intend by the Constitution? How did they expect us to keep them together and operate under those documents? Well, the prophet did that with the scriptures. And the prophet calls people back to obedience, back to the narrow path, back to the ideal. And to the extent that I'm a Road to Concord prophet, I try to call this nation back to its founding, which you cannot do without getting into the Bible. You're going to get into the Greeks. You're going to get into French philosophers here and there. You're going to get heavily into English common law and English political history. You will. But all of that, if you understand the scriptures, that's all part of biblical prophecy. It's the playing out of biblical prophecy. I try to connect that on We Who Are Lost. But that's what the prophet did, the religious prophet, the biblical prophet. And like the prophet, during times of rejection, when Israel was rejecting the word of Yahweh in his Torah, the prophet is hated. The people despise them. The prophet is mocked, scorned, murdered. And I realized that the friend of mine who told me that My biggest problem has been the hole in my face just south of my nose, even though what came out of it was usually had some thought given to it, was usually had a lot of truth attached to it. That friend of mine is worldly. He's not religious. He adheres to the principles of this world. That's why he has never liked what I say. I noticed that he said there's truth comes out of it. Now, he caveated it, usually some truth. There's more truth comes out of my mouth than what he wants to admit. He can't admit it because then he's face to face with his own wrongs. Same reason that the people murdered the prophets. We've got to kill the man that's causing us trouble. Why is he causing you trouble? If there's nothing to what he says, why do you have to silence him? It's like with censorship in our time. If there's nothing to what's being said, why do you have to silence the voice? You shouldn't have to. If there's somebody out in the streets and you have a town idiot crying the sky is falling, and it's obviously not, why silence the voice? Now, it's different if that kid is crying wolf in a world full of shepherds. That's disruptive to the organized function, day-to-day routine of the society, especially when there's no wolf. The day there is a wolf, nobody goes out there. He has undermined the reliability and trust in that society. That isn't crying something false. That's subversion. You should address that. But if I'm out there and I'm telling you the end is coming, you've got that religious nut on the corner. The end is coming. Well, he's right. Sky is falling. Yeah, the end is coming. And we tend to ignore that person. What harm does that do to the society? I'll be honest with you, none. What harm does that do to you? Ooh, now that's a different answer. So if I preach the truth and nobody in society listens, big deal. But if I'm preaching the truth and you're my friend and you know there's truth in what I'm saying, you just don't want to face it. You don't want to look the monster in the face because of what it means for you, not me. That does make a difference. There is a big deal there. So in this particular case, I'm tweaking that friend of mine. And he was trying to get me to admit, why are you still... He liked the fact that I said I was no longer a Republican. I gave that up a long time ago. The implication was good. Now you can become a Democrat because you're finally realizing that Trump is unconstitutional and he's destroying the nation. Yeah, he's unconstitutional. Yes, he's laying the groundworks for a possible destruction of the nation. But where the heck was my friend during Biden? I mean, my friend still thinks Biden won the 2020 election. He doesn't want to face reality. But yet he's telling me that my biggest problem is I've always told people the truth that they didn't want to face. That's what the prophet does. That's what the idealist does. My friend was happy to climb on board the slippery slope. My other buddy who I had lunch with yesterday, he occasionally listens. He's telling me to get on the slippery slope too. Compromise is what it is. It's what he was trying to tell me about being in the military. You have to learn how to compromise. I've told you before, I had an opportunity to become a syndicated radio host. 233 shows to start with, 233 stations across the country. And the reason I didn't, at first I was excited, but then I was told what I was going to be able to say and what I couldn't say and what I had to say. That would have required me to compromise my ideal. In other words, I'm intentionally shooting away from the bullseye. Now I'm shooting for, if I'm lucky, the 4 ring, but probably the 3 or the 2 ring. I can't do that. It's not in me. Yes, on a personal level, I'm a hypocrite. I don't always do the things I know I should do. And sometimes I do things I know I shouldn't do. But now if you put me in a court of law and you swear me in and you say, Joe, are you a hypocrite and a sinner and you just don't do the things you know you should do? I said, yep. Guilty. Put me in jail. Yes, sir.
You have your favorite caller.
Is this Mr. Zinker?
Hello.
Hello. What's up, brother?
Hey, Joe. Hey, man, your volume's way down for me. I could hear Charlie. I can't hear you very well. But that being said, you need to do a show on the subject of, and you need to define compromise. Too many people confuse compromise and capitulation, and too many people use compromise, especially from the left, as a method of gaining capitulation from the other side. In a
That's actually
one side surrender of value. The way compromise is done today, one side surrenders a value.
That's actually an excellent idea. I will do that. We will
All
definitely do that, Mr. Zinker.
As my favorite Ayn Rand said, the only in any compromise between food and poison, only death wins.
Yes. Yes.
So anytime anybody brings that subject up with me and tells me I should compromise on something, do you know what I ask them a question? You know what I asked?
What's that one?
What have you got to offer? Because they have never thought of. They expect me to give. They don't expect to give anything. They're trying to coerce me into a surrender.
Amen, brother.
All right.
All right. I appreciate the call. I'll do that.
For a while. All right. I'm driving, so I'm going to cut out.
All right, brother.
See you later.
Drive safe. That's a show we're going to do. But I was talking about the slippery slope. Once you start to compromise, I compromise my ideal. Okay, I won't shoot for the V ring. I'll just shoot for the bullseye. Okay, Joe, here's another $1. Hey, Joe, you want to make $5? Okay, shoot for the four ring. Yeah, but now I'm not hitting the bullseye. Yeah, but you're still close. It's a 4. You get 4 points. So, okay, now they're giving me $5. Hey, Joe, you want to make $100? Yeah, shoot for the 3 ring. 3 ring? Well, yeah, I mean, you're still on the target. Don't worry, you're still making points. Shoot for the 3 ring. That way, we can reach a bigger audience and you can influence more people. So you'll still be able to give them 3 of the 5 points worth of information, and you'll get a lot more money and a lot bigger audience, and people will know your name. So, okay, I'll take you $100 and I shoot for the 3 ring. Hey, Joe, we've got an opportunity to make you national on 1,000 shows. Half the country every week will hear you. You're going to make $1 million a year. We just need you to shoot for the 2 ring. Dude, we've gotten 3 points away from the ideal. Yeah, but look at how many people you can influence. Okay. Hey, Joe. Yeah. If you want to keep your job, you got to start shooting for the 1 ring. Well, man, that's so far from the ideal. I might as well not be doing anything. Yeah, but you're going to reach everybody in the country. Some people overseas. Look at how influential you'll be now. And I'm going to give you $10 million a month, but you got to shoot for the 1 ring. There's that little bit of arsenic in your food. That's how it works. That's the slippery slope. I've seen this in my business. I had the largest distributor in my industry wanted to pick up my company's product line. And for the first few months, he ordered a ton of stuff. And it was very hard for us. We even had to hire an extra person to keep up with production. And man, I was cash flush. After a while, he demanded a bigger discount and free shipping. No big deal. Then he quit ordering altogether. And I realized that all of a sudden I had all these employees and this overhead, and the income that I was depending on to make it work had gone away. And I did start to suffer because I didn't want to fire my employees, but he had become over half my business. And then after he hadn't ordered for 3 months, I got a phone call and he says, hey, why don't you sell me your business? And he offered me a fraction of what it was worth. And I saw what he was doing. And I realized he had acquired a lot of companies that way. But he didn't get mine. He could have. It would have been very easy for me to do that because I was under a lot of financial strain at the moment because I had fallen into that trap. I had taken that first step down the slippery slope. And this is how evil, where I define evil as nihilism, anything that destroys rather than builds, that's how evil works, a little at a time. And sometimes evil is happy just to let you shoot and hit the 4 ring. You're almost on the bullseye, but not quite. Because sometimes it only takes a little bit of arsenic. Now, a little bit of arsenic won't kill you. They used to use it as a remedy to certain diseases. But now if I have just a little bit of arsenic that will not kill me, but I drink that potion 4, 5, 6 times a day, that eventually will kill me. So if I give you the 4 ring 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day, never giving you the full 5 ring information, eventually I destroy the ideal. That's how the slippery slope works. And it's a fallacy when you say that A must lead to Z. The problem is the slippery slope is not always a fallacy. If I tell you that compromising your morals will eventually lead to trouble in your life and that you'll compromise more and more and easier, you could say, nope. Yes, you treat heartworm dogs with arsenic. Yes. See, Miss Stratton understands how this works. It's used as medicines, but you got to very carefully meter it. And then we have a Bupa 73 is saying churches are told what they can and cannot say, correct? They use the tax exemption to control what the churches can and cannot say. Because the church is so enamored with money, they accept those restrictions. See, the church is told, shoot for the 4 ring, and we won't tax you. So the church shoots for the 4 ring. And then what happens is, oh, got to have gay marriage. Well, we don't do gay marriage. That's against our religion. Well, we're going to tax you. Okay, now the church is shooting for the 3 ring, et cetera, et cetera. Until now, the visible church isn't even shooting for the 1 ring anymore. That's the slippery slope. And the time is when it's not a fallacy is when I can show you historical precedents, patterns, or I can show you the tendencies in human nature. So for me, spiritually, I do not value the same things as this world. Money, fame, success, legacy. I could care less. And I mean, I literally could care less. If I cared about those things, I wouldn't be doing the job I'm doing. If I cared about those things, I wouldn't be doing this show. I would have taken that radio program. If I was chasing money and I didn't have a moral compass, well, Charlie's fond of saying I'd be a flat out evil individual, a very dangerous evil individual. And I would be. But because I don't value those things, because I value capital T truth, law and order and structure, while still retaining individual rights and liberties. That's what makes me a classic liberal. Since I'm those things, the world rejects me, and it rejects my ideal. So to me, after listening to my friends, because one of them told me, you're not listening to me. I told them, you know me better than that. You may not think I'm listening to you, but I am. If I wasn't, I wouldn't have asked you to have lunch. I wouldn't be talking about this stuff with you. I do listen. Well, this is kind of like what Mr. Zinker just said with compromise. People actually mean surrender. When they say you're not listening, what they're actually telling me is you're not agreeing with me. I heard you. In a lot of cases, I don't agree. And I realize that my idealism, the things that I shoot for, have been the biggest blessing in my life. Like I told you at the beginning of the show, it's not a handicap. It's not a hindrance. And I wear it as a badge of honor because I realize now it's a bulwark for my soul. It is a standard to which I can repair, run for shelter, comfort, protection, exactly the way Scripture tells me Yahweh's word works. I can find shelter and protection in meditating on his word because I know that is the path to the target, to righteousness. That's the way. When I have no understanding of what I should do with this, that, or the other situation or choice in my life, I run to that standard, that bulwark, that I can repair to that certainty that I'll be all right as long as I do that, as long as I conform to that ideal, that standard, his ideal, his standard. If it were going to be in this country, you repair to the Constitution, original intent as the founders explained it. Now, my buddy that I was having lunch with, he does not like the fact that I'm telling everybody, if you want to maintain individual rights and liberty, private property, a meritocracy, if you want to retain liberty in any sense of the word in this country now, you had dang well better start pushing for secession. You have to push for a national divorce. And he's like, no, Joe, we settled that with the Civil War. Actually, no, we didn't. But I'm trying to explain to him, if you do not do that, let me put it in Christian terms. You are not going to be able to marry the Canaanite woman and change her into a Hebrew. She is going to change you into a pagan. And what was the experience of Israel? That's exactly what happened. You are not going to be able to marry compromise and still be able to remain pure. You cannot marry something contrary to the original intent of the founding fathers and still expect to operate the country according to their ideals, their principles. You cannot operate the Constitution properly unless it is according to the ideal expressed in the Declaration of Independence. You cannot understand the ideal expressed in the Declaration of Independence if you do not know the historic backgrounds of the Bible. It's not possible. I don't mean that I'll tell you in the scriptures, you can read the Bible and still get your salvation, but you won't understand the fullness, the richness of the scriptures. That's true. You don't have to know everything there to get your salvation. But if I'm going to tell you that if without understanding the Bible, you will never understand how to operate the Constitution, that's also true, but it's different. You can get your salvation reading the Bible without understanding all the background. You cannot operate the Constitution properly and not understand all the background. It's kind of like the reverse thing here. You need to know the background of the scriptures, or you will never operate the Constitution properly. You can't. Remember what Adams told you. That Constitution was made for a moral and religious people and will not work for any other. He meant Christian. He didn't say that, Joe. You will not find another moral religion, not by what they consider moral. Joe, the Mormons are pretty moral. No, they're not. The Mormons go against natural law. They just don't realize it. Muslims think they're moral. Okay, yeah, right, whatever. They totally thrash the natural law. I mean, anything outside of the natural law is not moral. We covered this already. Well, your Bible is just a revealed law, Joe. That's not natural law. The founding fathers were picking up a tradition of Christian theology, Christian philosophy, that argued, using Paul, Romans chapter 2, and other sections of the Bible, that the revealed law, the law given by Moses and the prophets and by the Messiah, is nothing more than the explanation of the natural law. And we started with, I think, therefore I am, got to the natural law, and from the natural law to the revealed law, with nothing more than reason guided by experience. And the comment, I think, therefore I am. Those two things, that comment and reason guided by experience, got us directly to the Ten Commandments. It's the same way when Yeshua said, I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill the law. He's like, I didn't come to get rid of it. I came to explain it, correct it, put it back in its natural place in the world. When you dismiss, discard, do away with that ideal, you're not stepping down the slippery slope. You are grabbing the zoom flume slide and taking a flying leap off the end of the slide down the slippery slope. And the inevitable consequences is a crash on the bottom of the slide. Because that slide doesn't lead to the water pool on the water slide or to the puddle at the bottom of the metal slide. That's the slippery slope into nihilism ends in the trash compactor in Star Wars, A New Hope. Only there's going to be no R2-D2 to shut it down for you. You're going to get squished. So when people call me an idealist, I think from now on, I'm going to say thank you. I know I don't always hit the V ring. I don't always hit the bullseye. I quite often hit the 1 or 2 ring. Sometimes I even miss the paper. But I know where the target is. And the next time I line up my sights, I'm shooting for the V ring again. I might jerk the trigger. I might breathe. I might push it, anticipating the recoil, flinch. If you're a shooter, you know where the target, where the bullet's going to land in all of those. And it'll make the bullet go in different directions if you're a shooter. If Wade were with us, he'd understand. I know Aaron Spikes understands. But then when I see where it hits, I know what I did and I know how to correct it. I have a standard by which I can repair my actions and to which I can repair when I need comfort. Charlie, anything you want to add before we wrap this show?
Well, I was thinking earlier you were talking about prophets and and how they're hated and everything, and I was thinking about prophecy a little bit too. And we always think of prophets as predicting these things that just out of nowhere kind of things, but a lot of times they're only predicting what they know has happened before in history, and they see it happening all over again. And that's a lot of what we do here on this show is we're taking what's happened in history before and looking at today and seeing where we're at and where we're going, and adding 1 + 1 = 2, and voila, here we are, and this is where we're going.
Mm-hmm. And it's exactly how I realized we were going to be heading down the path of 1920s, 30s Germany 20 years ago. Well, right. 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we are.
So how'd this show turn out for you, Charlie?
Well, it's okay, but it's kind of depressing because how do you get people that are just stuck in their traditions and they're watching their evening TV. I'm guilty myself of this, and just creating that little buffer around them where they're comfortable and everything, but the world is burning around them.
If you do not care to pursue capital T truth and understanding to the level that you can turn around and explain things to others in your own words, then you won't care about things like this. It doesn't bother you. It troubles you. You just want to have your bread and circuses and live a life of comfort and ease until you die. I happen to believe there'll be a huge penalty for that. Even if you don't believe in heaven and hell, you are eternal. Whatever the other side of the veil looks like, there will be a penalty for that. I'm convinced of this. But if you want to seek that capital T truth, it's going to cost you, it's going to hurt, and there's a price to be paid. Not just in work, but the world will hate you.
True that.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap this one up. Tomorrow, the next 2 chapters of Dr. Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm. He's starting to get really good now. Hopefully you're following along with us. I realize now that it'll probably go into January before we finish that book. So be it. Gives me time to get a few other things done. We'll just do what we have to do. Gives you guys more time to read it. We just want to say thank you for being here. We appreciate the audience. It is, I know I speak for Charlie and Natasha here because I asked them, but it is my honor to have you here with me. There are a lot of other places you could be on the internet, TV, whatever. A lot of other things you could be doing. I'm not an easy person to listen to. I know that. I'm not going to compromise on that. There are reasons I'm not easy to listen to. Some of them, personal choice and things, but also mostly, I believe, because of what it is I'm saying. And that a lot of times I say it without putting sugar on that pill. You can disagree. I get that. I understand. But you're here. So as long as you're here and as long as I'm teaching, whether it's scripture or otherwise, I'm going to remember that a teacher will be held accountable for what they teach. So I'll only teach what I know to be true at this time in my life. I might learn. I might have to change my position, and I will yell from the mountaintops when that happens. But until then, I'll hold the line on what I believe to be true, and I'll explain why. Because I'm starting to realize we who are lost is looking for the 7,000 that have not bent their knee to Baal. The road to Concord is looking for Gideon's 300. If you don't know what that means, I'll explain later. Keep watching. Until the next time we see each other, y'all stay safe. Take care. We love you. Bye-bye.